You're listening to a Comics XF podcast. Hello and welcome to the Comics XF Interview Podcast, the show where two best friends talk about comics with the people who make them. I'm Dan Grote.
And I'm Matt Lazowitz.
And this week's guest is launching, or has launched by the time you hear this, his Kickstarter campaign for the third and final chapter of the OZ, making his 8th appearance on the show, David Pepose. Welcome back, David.
8th appearance. That's crazy. Eighth time's the charm. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited that you invited me back after the previous 7. I'm excited to chat all things the OZ with you today. This book has been a long time coming. It's been in the works, really since the last campaign. I'm proud to say the book is finished. It is fully drawn, colored, lettered. It is done. And so I am so excited to bring our action-packed saga to its long-awaited conclusion.
We are off to the races then. That's good news. Great to hear. So yeah, 8th appearance on the show, which means you're on once a year, like a holiday, like clockwork. And we recently recorded our 400th episode, so I've been kind of diving into the numbers and stats of the show, and we've made jokes about an all-time leaderboard for guests, but I finally went through the back catalog and set it up. So, David, you are our third most frequent flyer on this podcast in its history. We have to fight. Okay, so number one with several bullets is our good IRL friend Rob Lynch, who's done a number of our Three Amigos specials. He's got 22 episodes under his belt. After him is Bat Chat co-host Comics XF staff writer Will Nevin at 11.
Okay. All right. Yep. All right. I will take that. All right. No. That is those people deserve to go ahead of me. Okay. I'm not jealous anymore. Good on those guys. All right. No, they're doing the Lord's work. Coming on all those podcasts. But okay. All right. That is a lofty company to be in. Well, thank you guys for agreeing to have me on so many times. You guys have really kind of been there over the course of a lot of my career. And I think that's the thing that kind of I like just looking back at this book is I started it very early in my career. Like this was one of the 3 books I started writing after Spencer and Locke came out. And it's been in the works for a long time. I wrote the OZ, the back half of it, I wrote it concurrently with Scout's Honor. I finished those 2 books around the same time. It's just taken a minute to get all the artwork together. But now that it's all here, I think readers are going to find that the OZ was fully worth the wait. And also just for everybody who's kind of gotten to know me since that last campaign. I hadn't had any Marvel work since then. I hadn't done Space Ghost or Speed Racer or Devil Wears My Face. And so all the people who have gotten to know me over the years, we're going to have print. We have print and digital catch-up tiers for all 3 issues of the book. So if you missed the previous campaigns, this is like the perfect opportunity to really catch up on what I consider some of my best work in my career.
Well, before we get too deep into it, yes, you are here to talk about your campaign for issue 3 of the OZ, your post-war reimagining of The Wizard of Oz, drawn by Ruben Rojas, colored by Whitney Koger, and lettered by DC Hopkins. Matt, flick your heels together 3 times and say, there's no place like Kickstarter.
Now leading the resistance against the evil Scarecrow's regime, Dorothy, the granddaughter and namesake of Dorothy Gale, must join forces with the Tin Soldier, the Prince of Lions, and Jack Pumpkinhead if she hopes to find the all-powerful Silver Slippers and bring peace to the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ.
So the campaign for issue 2 was in 2021, 5 years ago.
Yes, it was.
You've already mentioned a lot has happened since then.
Yeah.
what was kind of what was kind of the process or the struggle, whatever you want, however you want to describe it, like getting the band back together for this the third and final installment.
Well, the thing is, we never really separated. It really like we've been working on this third Kickstarter since the minute we finished the last one. It's just been a matter of, and I know it's so easy to forget. I work in mostly monthly comics, with companies behind us. But particularly for stuff that's self-published, for something that doesn't have a company behind it, I think it's sometimes easy to lose sight that, it's human beings with human lives that are making all these things. And really, that's kind of what happened with the third issue of the OZ is that it had, like I said, it had already been written. It was just life hit my artist, Ruben Rojas, just a number of times. And in terms of, he got married, he had a kid, he was living in Spain kind of during the worst of COVID, which kind of really affected the whole country and its economy. And I believe there was something either with one of his parents or his spouse's parents. But it's just one of those things that it just kind of made the artwork production kind of slow down. And as I kind of thought about it and I talked it over with Ruben, obviously I did not want to kick Ruben when he was down. He really was the heart and soul of our first two issues, and I felt that I didn't want to. Not only did I not want to pull out the rug from underneath Ruben, but I also didn't want to pull out the rug from underneath our readers. I wanted to make sure that this book stayed consistent, across from beginning to end. And so I said I said to Ruben, I was like, just get the pages done as you can. And so it was a slow drip in terms of getting all the pages together. Um, we finally got them together fully in the fall. And so uh, for then, we already had Whitney Kogar kind of working on pages as they were arriving. And then Dave Hopkins has been working on the lettering. We finished, I think, the colors of this issue, this double-sized issue. It was around the holidays of last year, and then I, within a few weeks, did the lettering pass, and that was such an interesting experience because I obviously have had a lot more experience since the last time that I've done anything with the OZ. So it was a nice exercise to kind of figure out like how can I make this thing cleaner? How can I, make this thing feel punchier with, the experience that I have, but still have it read like the previous two issues. So it was really just, it took a long time for the artwork to come in. But ultimately, I felt anybody who reads the OZ, particularly from start to finish, they're going to see like, oh, this is like a cohesive story that came out exactly as it was supposed to. I've been lucky that I've knock on wood, I've only had one fill-in in my career, almost 10 years. And the one book I had a fill-in in, our fill-in artist did an amazing job with an extremely punishing deadline. But I look at that book and I'm always like, it's the thing I don't like about the book is that, we have a middle chapter that was done by somebody totally different. I didn't want to do that for the OC. I feel like Kickstarter as a community, it it is different from the traditional Wednesday Warriors. I think Kickstarter people are looking to go off the beaten path. They're not necessarily tied to any particular creator or IP. They want artisanal comics from the creator. They're willing to pay artisanal prices for that. They're willing to wait longer for that. And my thinking was we had waited, we'd made our creator our readers wait long enough. I wanted to make sure that the book was done by the time we finished the Kickstarter, that literally all we have to do is wait for Kickstarter to disperse the funds and we can immediately call the printer and say, here's the print number, get working. We're even working with a fulfillment company, the amazing team at Laguna Studios. So that way you don't have to worry about a guy who's writing four books and has a baby on the way, packing and shipping your books. It's going to be in the hands of the professionals who have told me that by the time that the books arrive, that they should have everything packed and shipped within 3 weeks. So, we have on our campaign, we have a December deadline, but I anticipate we're going to get everybody their books much sooner than that. So yeah, believe me, it's one of those things I've wanted the book to come out quite a bit as well. I've been sort of chomping at the bit, and poor Ruben, I was checking in with him, I think like every other week, pretty much since our last campaign, just checking in, being like, hey, how are we doing? What's great is he really did an amazing job for this finale. Like you can tell that he really kind of like left it all on the field with this. I know that this is a book he believes in just as much as I do. The fact that we won a Ringo Award together for this book. Yeah, it would have been very easy for Ruben to leave us hanging and vice versa. But if I don't have loyalty to this team, what do I have? And so I know that there are plenty of people who are like, oh man, like I wish I wanted to, why didn't the book come sooner? And all I can say is we wanted to make sure that we had it ready on time, that when this Kickstarter shows, this book is ready, and that we didn't sacrifice one iota of quality or consistency along the way.
When he started the OZ, it
Yeah.
was a meditation on coming home for a veteran of the forever wars of the early 21st century.
Yeah.
Now we're a quarter into that century, more than a quarter. Let's all turn to dust. And the forever wars are over, but new bullshit has taken its place.
Yeah.
I guess, with that 5 year gap, was there any way, if at all, the course of human events changed the story?
It didn't change the story. I mean, like we had everything pretty locked on the tracks, and I do think, sadly, like I think those themes still resonate. They do feel timely. I will say there is a line in this issue that did change as a result of all this, and it's a small thing, but I think it was something that was really important, which is our villain of the piece is the Scarecrow. For those who haven't read the OZ, it basically is, Dorothy Gale's granddaughter is this Iraq war veteran who finds out that grandma killing two wicked witches and then leaving. That's not the happy ending that we've all been fed, that it just kind of plunged Oz into decades of brutal civil war, not unlike Baghdad, that sort of power vacuum. And so our villain is the Scarecrow, this guy who, of course, he's the only one even remotely equipped to try to, bring order back to Oz. But, you know, it's all cold intellect. It's not heart. It's not, it's him sort of just thinking, it's him running the numbers, and the numbers tell him a war machine. That's how you do it. Like you basically force people into fear and submission. And so he has a line in this issue where he's sort of saying like, you know, um, how people want a strong man. And I wrote that I guess it was in the middle of the first Trump administration. And as I was kind of looking back at that line, I did kind of add a little thing to it where it's like it's Oz, it's Iraq, it's America. That like there are people out there who just want somebody who projects the will to do what needs to be done, the costs be damned. And so yeah, I mean, I think the Scarecrow, I think, is smarter and somehow is not as shameless as our idiot shameless president. But I do think that I think that slide into fascism, that not only just how they consider that the path of least resistance, but they also see it as a tool of just expressing like whatever resentment that they have bubbling up. And I do think that that is something that you'll see, especially in this issue. The Scarecrow is a figure of resentment at his core, and that's sort of the thing that I think really sells him as a villain to me, is that it's not like a switch flipped and then suddenly he's like, I'm going to become the bad guy. He is the product of decades of failure and setbacks and resentment, and this sense of outrage that you wanted this man, you wanted to be a leader, and now you've got it and you hate it and you're miserable, and you're mad at everybody else for not taking this burden off your shoulders. The Scarecrow he's the villain, but there is a little bit of him that you're like, oh, like that evolution makes a perfect sort of sense to me. But yeah, I think you get to see a little bit more inside the Scarecrow's head in this issue, and I do think, you know, given administration that we're under right now, there's certainly a lot of parallels to all of that. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it takes people who are courageous and it takes people who are willing to risk a lot in their lives. You see all the people who have, stood up against ICE. Those are people who are willing to lay their lives on the line to stop, a corrupt and evil regime. And that is sort of, I think, that's a little bit of what Dorothy and sort of her resistance is trying to do is they're trying to stop not only kind of freeing Oz itself, but really trying to contain the poison. Because that's been the Scarecrow's ultimate goal through this series. He's trying to find the Silver Slippers so he can invade our world next. And that sort of, interplay between our kind of corrupted, war-torn world and how that's affected now Oz, and now it might come back to haunt us. That is something that I do think parallels kind of like our real world history.
So, L. Frank Baum's original Wonderful Wizard of Oz
Yeah.
book entered the public domain in 1956.
Yes.
And since then, there's been no shortage of adaptations of that world and its characters.
Yeah.
But the hot version now, kind of culturally, is the Wicked film franchise,
Sure.
based off the musical, based off the book, based on the
Yeah.
novel, but Pushed by Sapphire, whatever. But I have been to a non-zero number of green and pink Wicked themed children's birthday parties in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Now, obviously the OZ and Wicked are doing two very different things with two
Sure.
very different color palettes. Again, credit to Whitney, but is there opportunity for you there to say to all those little like Glinda and Elphaba cosplayers out there, hey, I got a comic for you when you're ready for that heavier shit?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I listen, I always say that is a discussion for their parents. If they are cool with it, I would love to listen. I think that speaks though, you really hit the nail on the head of Oz as a mythology is some of the most iconic imagery in all of modern culture. I think it's just as iconic as Superman. That is, and I think it's kind of woven into what I consider like 20th century Americana. Because I mean, the film, the original Warner Brothers film, that did all that pioneering work in Technicolor. It wasn't the first, but it was sort of like that's the critical mass right there. When you have imagery that's that elemental, that filled with that many archetypes of characters. I mean, when you look at Dorothy and Scarecrow and Tin Man and the Lion, I mean, that's basically like Carl Jung, at that point. When you have material like that, I think it does invite people to try to reinterpret it. That imagery is very flexible, and it really kind of does kind of stretch across all genres, and that's something I've always been interested in since my very first books. I drew a lot of inspiration when I started out by Ed Brubaker, Criminal, particularly Last of the Innocent, and Afterlife with Archie, which those both kind of came out back to back. And you take something like the Archie mythos, which is about as clean cut as anything you might ask for in American culture, and then you're able to take either this like kind of twisted noir version or this like gnarly zombie version. And I remember that was a big light bulb moment for me reading them. Was I was like, oh, if you take something that kind of endures like this, you can find ways to kind of like splice different genres into it, and the story math still makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I would love for there to be any sort of cross pollination between, Wicked fans and OZ fans and just general Wizard of Oz fans. Um, Oz as a mythology, it really endures, and it's amazing kind of the big tent of people that go for it. I was just at Denver Comic Con this weekend, Fan Expo Denver, and I brought a few copies of the OZ. I was, we were building up towards our campaign, and I wanted people to know, like, hey, we have a campaign coming. Here's the first issue, and it's amazing how many people just looking at the covers were like, oh, what's that? And as soon as I told them the pitch, they were like, "Oh, like yeah, I really want that." And I don't think it was just the Mad Max of it all. Although I do think people love that aesthetic, particularly in the comic sphere. But I think it's everybody knows the story of the Wizard of Oz, and so when you're able to kind of like subvert it and turn it on its ear, at first people kind of chuckle, and then they're like, "Wait, like, but I want to know the punchline." And so, yeah, I think that's kind of been the secret for books like this and Spencer and Locke is, I take kind of these concepts that seem on their face a little outrageous, a little silly, and I smash them together and then I play it totally straight. I'm like, there's a way to find some real emotion and something that resonates with the real world. I mean, I once upon a time, and you guys know this, but I used to be a newspaper reporter. That was my first job out of college. I'd interned in many newsrooms before that time. And I worked at the Berkshire Eagle, Pittsfield, Massachusetts, my first job out of college. And I was on general assignment. I covered a lot of different things. So I did the crime beat at night. I did state politics, and I also did local veteran stories. And so I interviewed a lot of people coming back, people who were dealing with PTSD and traumatic brain injury, people who were grappling with the challenges of reintegrating back into civilian life, which is, it's less regimented. It's sort of everybody, it's very individualized. It's sort of every man for himself. It is chaotic, but not in the way that an active battlefield is. And people, that is a big adjustment for a lot of people coming back. It's a big struggle for so many people. And so a lot of those stories, the idea of, what's the number one message in The Wizard of Oz? There's no place like home. But what happens when you come back and home's not the way you remember it anymore? And that's really the OZ. When you boil it down, is this memory you think you know, when you're finally back in it, it's not the way you imagined. And how do you move forward from that? How do you sort of build something new when you realize that the past is a place you'll never be able to return? So yeah, it's a fun book. It's got the action and camaraderie. There's a little bit of Star Wars in that DNA for sure. But yeah, at the same time, like I do think we take a few stabs at actually saying something about sort of the nature of war and the and what it means to actually work for peace. And why do we constantly seem to fall short along the way?
And I have to say, as someone who's read the book, Wicked, the book,
Yeah,
way closer in tone to the OZ than the
yeah,
movie.
yes, yes.
Those kids in the cute pink and green outfits are in for a rude awakening when they read that book.
Yes, yes,
This is not a
100%.
judgment. This is just simply a statement of fact.
Yeah,
Not a light read.
no,
And speaking on the other reinterpretations of Oz,
yeah,
we might have talked about this over the many appearances, but I don't remember. And I, for the first time since I was a child in the past year, rewatched Return to Oz. And you mean you're using Jack Pumpkinhead.
yeah.
So what are your memories of that particular Oz flavored nightmare fuel?
Yeah, that nightmare fuel is definitely the word to describe it because I definitely, as a child, again, like I saw Wizard of Oz and then I was like, oh, this other they came out with another one and I think I probably made it like I don't know 25 minutes. I was so freaked out. So revisiting it as an adult, I was like, oh, like that's gnarly, like that's cool, and there is a hint of subversiveness to it. It is certainly not the iconic squeaky clean original movie. There's almost like it's almost like a little like a Tim Burton or a little bit like Labyrinth, DNA in there. But yeah, I remember, like I don't think I overtly thought at the time, oh, like I could do something with this. I think when I watched it, this was before I even gave myself permission to consider a career in writing. But I do remember like at the time thinking like, oh, that is wild. That is like a left field kind of interpretation of it. So I'm not sure I necessarily appreciated it in the moment when I watched it. But as I was sort of working on this, that immediately sprang to mind. And you know, we use Jack for a couple of reasons. First off, you're sort of thinking like I've already taken a major piece off the board in the OZ, and that the Wicked Witch is dead, and so you can't use her as a villain. And when I was sort of thinking about all the characters that could kind of take their place, the Scarecrow was the one that sort of made the most sense to me. I kept thinking about that line from the movie of, oh, I'll miss you most of all. And so that's like really heartbreaking that like this Dorothy's favorite trying so hard to kind of live up to her example has fallen so miserably short. And so at the same time, I these archetypes work best when they rhyme. And so I was trying to think like, okay, how can I find ways to sort of take the original characters and remix them in ways that you see what I'm going for if you squint, but they still feel new and different. And so Jack, first off, like it feels very Pokemon, but like he's a plant type, just like a Scarecrow. And so I immediately kind of had this thought of like, okay, there's probably some kinship there. The man made of straw and the guy with the pumpkin for a head. And so the idea of, okay, we're gonna have these guys at first. Jack is sort of he's the Scarecrow's kind of leading assassin. He's the guy who, over the course of our first two issues, he's hunting down Dorothy. He's trying to put down this kind of growing resistance that's growing under her banner. As you'll see in our preview pages on the Kickstarter, Jack has failed a few too many times and has kind of outlived his usefulness to the Scarecrow. And that was always part of the plan was sort of we needed a new Scarecrow to join this team. And so Jack being sort of like you've got that iconic pumpkin head that imagery really like carries him. But also then you get a little bit of like there's Taskmaster in there for sure. A little bit of Green Goblin, Hobgoblin with the pumpkin bombs and the glider. A little Jack Skellington with the costume and sort of that sense of the flair for the dramatic. So, he was always sort of meant to join the team, but, we were always looking to kind of reimagine these characters. You see Dorothy, for example, who instead of like the innocent point of view character like we have in the original, she's a soldier. That's her background. That's her training. She is a hammer and she is designed to hit problems like they're nails. And so the way we sort of designed her, Ruben Rojas and I, we talked about it. I was like, look, I want to lean into that sort of her military background, but I want to make it that it's all materials that could be conceivably scavenged from the land of Oz. She did not come here expecting to do any of this. She was in a Humvee that was snatched up by a tornado. So they basically had to scavenge parts from that and whatever else they could find in Oz. Luckily, she wound up in the hands of the Tin Man, or as we're the Tin Soldier in our book, who, as you see in the first issue cover, he is kind of this hulking juggernaut of just scrap metal that he's been broken and rebuilt so many times in the heart of battle. But at the same time, we said it in our first issue, he basically had to turn his own heart off. He just saw too much. And so that's sort of our way of paying off his arc from the original series. We have the Prince of Lions, who's a really fun character, and he's going to get kind of a fun arc in this issue as well, in that he's the son of the Cowardly Lion. And he's basically taken over the animal kingdom. His father was killed in the early days of the war, and they didn't want to demoralize the war effort. So he's been wearing a mask the whole time, and basically everybody thinks that it's his father. And he's been sitting there just like kind of panicking to himself. What happens when they find out who I am? And how did dad do this? How did he lead? How did he sort of push his fears and doubts aside? And so that's sort of like when he meets somebody who has the kind of will that Dorothy does. He senses a bit of a kindred spirit, and he's able to sort of draw strength from this camaraderie in the same way that his father did. It's when you see kids looking up to their parents, they see them as they are in that moment. They don't see all the trials and tribulations that it took to get them to where they're at today. And so, it's something a little heartbreaking of, this guy asking Dorothy, like, did your grandmother ever say, like, how did my father like become fearless? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And then of course my favorite member of the team, the Wizard of Oz as a character is something that's really fun for me about the Wizard of Oz because it really leans into that core drama of deception. That is a character who, he's a flim flam man. He is somebody who, pay no attention to the wizard or to the guy behind the curtain. And I love that because that's that hint of subversion that I think binds the rest of the earnestness of the Wizard of Oz. Is that like there's still conflict in there, but also just like, yeah, this thing feels safe and comfortable, especially, looking back on it. But things are not always what they seem. And so I loved paying that off in our first issue, and that the Wizard of Oz is sort of a figurehead. He's sort of there's been a growing resistance building under this guy's name, and so of course we peeled back the curtain and revealed it was Toto all along. That Toto had had absconded to Oz, had learned to talk thanks to the magic of Oz, and basically was sort of like he and the Tin Man were sort of like, holding the torch in Dorothy's absence. And he's my favorite. Having a little terrier who talks like a British butler just like makes me laugh. I have a little terrier myself, Ruby, who we picked up in the aftermath of our first campaign. But yeah, he's a fun character who originally was not going to survive the first issue. And my terrier at the time, Holly, was diagnosed with melanoma, and I immediately was like, "Well, that's not happening in my book. I'm rewriting that," and that was ultimately for the best because he is like such a fun little scrappy character. I love not only is he smart, and seeing the ways that he navigates like an active battlefield is like a very fun and interesting challenge, but I love seeing him like standing next to like the Prince of Lions, like he's a peer. Like that's the thing about terriers is that they are little dogs with like big dog temperaments. They think that they're the biggest dog in the room. They're very territorial. They're extremely loyal, and they are feisty until death. And so, having this kind of like remixed band of, when you think of the Wizard of Oz, you think of them all walking in a line down the yellow brick road, and having sort of our kind of twists on these characters that Ruben just designed so expertly. I've never worked with an artist who seemingly has the inside track on everything that I'm imagining, as well as Ruben Rojas. Full stop. That first cover for the OZ is exactly the image I had in my head when I described it to him. Ruben is such a talented artist, and it is the reason why I was like, we'll take as long as it takes, is because that's the guy, he knows his best angles. That's a guy who knows how to design things. That is a guy who is able to juggle post-apocalyptic and fantasy and merge them so seamlessly. He is a formidable talent in comics. I cannot wait to find the next project to work on with him. And yeah, I'm very grateful and proud of all the work that Ruben, teaming up with Whitney Kogar, our amazing colorist, have done for this book.
Beyond this campaign,
Yeah.
do you foresee another campaign or maybe working with an existing publisher to collect the whole thing in trade at some point?
I mean, never say never. We don't have plans at the moment. It's one of those things. I wanted to focus on the campaigns first and foremost. It's not to say there haven't been people who've been interested. Heck, I've seen publishers who were interested, offered predatory deals, and then decided to publish their own ripoff versions of the OZ. It's happened twice. But the thing is that Kickstarter is the community for us. They're the ones that I want to cater to first and foremost because they believed in us. I developed the OZ for a publisher when I started. I wrote the first script and I kind of fleshed out sort of what the preliminary storyline, and we made it to like the 1 yard line. There was another fantasy book that was sort of it was us or them, and that was a more established creative team. I had only had Spencer and Locke under my belt. That editor was kind enough to tell me, "Hey, this is still really good." do not give up on this project. And so the next week I found Ruben Rojas and we started work. That's the thing I love most about Kickstarter is there is a learning curve going into it that I think oftentimes creators, especially, young and aspiring ones, but even, more established people who show up thinking, oh, this is free money. They don't realize there is a learning curve to it that, people do get in over their skis, whether they don't account to budget correctly. They don't know what printing costs are. They don't know what shipping costs are. They don't know how to navigate a printer. They don't know what a Gemini mailer is or how to fold one. I've folded many Gemini mailers at this point. At this point, it's going to be easier for me than changing a diaper. The thing is, though, once you learn all these things, and the great thing about Kickstarter is it is a community of creators who are all willing to help each other out, who are all willing to sort of show each other the ropes. I mean, I had Charlie Stickney and Rylan Grant and Pat Shand and Russell Helty and Kat Kalamia and Rylan Grant and Dave Schrader and many more other creators, Travis Gibb, many Richard Fairgray and many more that I'm leaving out. But talking with all of them, I got a sense of like, okay, here's how you sort of navigate all these things. And once you learn how to do that, it is so empowering as a creator because then you don't have to wait for permission anymore. You don't have to just, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of amazing books coming out through publishers, and I'm very lucky to be working with the publishers that I am. But there are, sometimes people don't see the vision. Sometimes there are books that don't necessarily play well in the pitch stage or don't play well in sort of the confines of the traditional publishing structure. Kickstarter is the place where creators can sell directly to readers. And there's something so intimate about that. I mean, comics as an industry, I think, is very intimate, in terms of the experience of reading it and the fact that, I go to conventions all the time and I'm able to meet readers one on one who, they don't know me and I don't know them, but I wrote something in my office by myself and then they read it across the country and it resonated with them. That's like magic. But it's not Kickstarter's a whole nother level. I've spoken with every single person who has backed us on the OZ. Every night of the campaign, I take an hour and I write thank you notes to every single person who's backed that day. Because I don't take it for granted. I don't take it lightly that they are willing to roll the dice on me and that they were willing to roll the dice on me before I had any Marvel books to my name, before I was writing Space Ghost or Speed Racer. I think that is the magic of Kickstarter as a community. It's the reason that I keep coming back. I know it's been a little while since the last time, and I want everybody to know it's not because he got busy doing other things. Really, my only consideration as far as that was concerned was just how can I get a good, clean runway to just devote to promoting the book, and not have to worry about another announcement coming out of my control that would cannibalize from that work. Thankfully, we're not. That's not anything we have to deal with on this score. That I can sort of now promote all of my work a bit concurrently, and that's something else that we're doing in this campaign. I know this is off topic, but I swerved us into this ditch, and I'm going to get us out of it. In that. This campaign, not only are we going to have all three issues of the OZ and in print and digital, and if you're a collector, we're going to have 4 variant covers for issue 3, and if you're a super collector, we'll have tiers for all 14 covers that we've done. But also, I believe in cross-pollinating between all the different demographics. Whether you're a convention goer, a Wednesday warrior, you're a Kindle reader, you're a Kickstarter fan, I want to introduce you to each other. And so this campaign has every book I've worked on as add-ons. You can get them individually. You can get them in discounted bundles. We have a bundle for 5 of my Marvel trades that we're selling at a discount. We have 5 of my licensed books. So that's the first 2 volumes of Space Ghost and Speed Racer and my Captain Planet trade. 5 of my creator-owned books. So both volumes of Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel and Scout's Honor and Devil That Wears My Face. We've got 10-ton Titan Terrier as an optional add-on if you want that as well. That one's a little bit my all ages friendly book. So yeah, I think it's being able to sort of take this opportunity to introduce everybody to the whole of my work. Because I write all my books. I try to make them accessible because I want fans for life. And that's the thing about Kickstarter that I love so much is these are passionate passionate fans. They're different from the Wednesday Warriors who show up in frequency. But I got to tell you, in terms of loyalty, in terms of like always showing up, man, the Kickstarter community is unlike anything else I've ever seen. But that's the sort of community that is always worth investing in.
You still have copies of like some your earliest stuff?
I do. I
Wow.
do. I it came out of necessity. I'm very lucky in that now work with the amazing team at Comic Sketch Art, who they carry my books to shows, but that was not always the case for me, particularly pre-Marvel. And so I would often carry books on my back. I would literally just drag a like two 50-pound double duffel bags, check them in, pay through the nose. That was a young man's game. I can't do that anymore. But I, and now looking back on it, seeing everything that happened to Action Lab, it feels like incredible foresight. I ordered quite a bit of my work because I knew this was my currency at conventions, and so I have the last copies of Spencer and Locke. That book's out of print. That doesn't You cannot get that book anymore unless it's secondhand or it's through me. And I feel like we will have some exciting updates to be able to share about that series relatively soon. It's been a long time of us trying to get the rights back, and I think we're just about there. But yeah, I have a whole closet in my apartment that is just books. And so I have quite a few copies of Spencer and Locke and Spencer and Locke 2 and Going to the Chapel. And I have a decent number of Devil That Wears My Face. I have both volumes of Savage Avengers. I have Moon Knight, City of the Dead. I have a decent amount of Punisher. There's a few of the more recent books that I will have to order for this campaign. But all my old stuff I've been saving specifically for this campaign.
That's amazing. And also kudos to your lovely wife for seeing that closet and being not being like, there could be shoes in here, or
No, no, no. It's definitely
something less gender stereotypy. It's
it's
probably
in it's to my wife is amazing and patient. To my one little bit of credit, this is in my office. But yes, it is. It's I think the latest count, including the OZ boxes and my other boxes, is I think it's like 40 boxes in there of just filled with books that we will be moving in the campaign. We will be sending whatever we need to send to Laguna Studios, and they will be packing all of that in each and every campaign.
I was curious. I was gonna, is there a sense of victory that you feel in being having, completed this trilogy, being able to complete this trilogy,
Yeah.
uh, since as of right now, and it sounds like you're feeling pretty optimistic, and that's great. But for very unfortunate legal reasons, there's another trilogy out there that you have not been able to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've said it to a few people. The third issue of the OZ and Spencer and Locke 3 are the two biggest bits of unfinished business in my entire career. Spencer and Locke 3, I don't beat myself up quite as much, just knowing that even if knowing the timing and knowing the constraints that everything was under when that company unfortunately was kind of circling the drain by the time the second arc concluded. There were already missed payments. There were already printers issues with the printer. And so it did not take long for the wheels to come entirely off on that. And so even if I had immediately written volume three and George Santiago Jr. had somehow immediately finished it, and it took him about a year to draw each volume of the previous two. There's no way we would have had it done in time and distributed by the time that Action Lab went under. But by the time, really, like, they were an early casualty of COVID and those shutdowns. So that has just been something that, like, I've been wanting to do, and George and I are in regular contact about it. We actually just spoke about it last month. As we are getting closer to officially getting the rights back, and we may already have them back at this point. I think it's just sort of like it's whether or not Action Lab decides to have any last gasp of a fight over it. The book's been out of print long enough, the contracts are void. So that's something that's been on the to-do list for a long time. But I have been busy with other stuff. And so I've just said, like, I'm not, that book will come when it's ready, when the universe wants it to come out. And honestly, I talk with my wife all the time that that may be something to bring back to Kickstarter, to again expose that to that new audience and also to finance the printing of a second run of the original series, since that's been long out of print. But the OZ, yeah, when I was looking at the final lettering of this, there was a sense of overwhelm that I did not expect, with this. But I think it comes down to I started this book as a younger, very scrappy, less seasoned, wet behind the ears creator. When I finished Spencer and Locke and the dust settled, and I opened my eyes and was like, I'm not persona non grata in this industry. Okay, my Calvin and Hobbes meets Sin City thing did not get me run out of town. I wrote down three ideas after that. The first one was going to the chapel. The second one is sort of my long gestating Grand Theft Astro, which at this point we just got to find an artist and a publisher for it now, and the OZ. So looking back on it now, sort of the totality of experience that I've been lucky enough to get. Yeah, it was kind of, it was weird. It was sort of like, you look face to face at your younger self for a minute. I've looked back, I read my earlier work, and like I still love Spencer and Locke. There are little warts on it that I'm like, oh, like I would have done that maybe a little differently, or I could have cut that thing now that I have a little more experience. But sort of being midway through it and being like, oh, okay, like this was some really cool stuff that I did. And okay, like here's like sort of a thing that I realized, oh, okay, I can do this a little differently. There's another way to skin this cat. But yeah, I mean, ask me again when the campaign's over. But I just knowing that it's done, just knowing that we can give our readers an ending, that I'm very proud of this book. And I will say, just having come off of a convention, people seem to really, really resonate with it. I mean, I said in another interview recently that when I started, I didn't give myself a lot of pressure between books because I was just starting. I didn't have anything to compare it to. So I said to myself, I made myself a deal that as long as it's a different muscle group, not every book has to be bigger than the last one. I don't, the approach has changed a little bit since then, now that I've sort of broken in successfully, there is that calculus of you want to make sure that if you're juggling multiple books and you only have finite time and energy and imagination, that you're not going for base hits. And that has been a challenge, certainly for me, is that now my creator owned work, there is a higher bar to it where I'm like, if this thing doesn't feel like it resonates in the same way as Spencer and Locke or OZ or Devil That Wears My Face, it may not be ready for prime time. But I will say, we do have some ideas that are ready for prime time, and I'm actually about to start working on the next one. So that is something that we'll be able to talk about a little bit in 2027. All I'll say is I'm getting to team up with another artist that I have already worked with and have delivered a very fun book with. So stay tuned on that one. Some fun stuff is brewing.
Teasers for your ninth appearance next year.
Yeah. The annual appearance. If I see
There
my
it is.
shadow, you get another 6 weeks of podcast.
So we don't want to let you go without talking about some of the other stuff that you're
Yeah,
still working on.
totally.
Because your two volumes on Space Ghost will be wrapping up soon.
Yes.
When we last talked last year, volume one was just about wrapping up, and you were
Yeah.
excited to get the next volume. How's it feel now that your
Yeah.
two volumes are done? You've told your that
Wow.
story.
Well, boy, I'm so proud of how Space Ghost Volume 2 is wrapping up. Like you said, our annual is up for pre-orders right now. It's coming out in July. It's going to be kind of the capstone of year two. And we did something a little differently than we did last year. And it was, Space Ghost is the book. I do feel like the little indie that could, in that Space Ghost Volume 1, we had a pretty regimented runway for that book. Dynamite approached me saying, "Hey, do you want to do a year?" Which I was able to finagle to 12 plus an annual. It was around issue 10, my Space Spectre issue, that Dynamite and I kind of had the same idea at the same time, which is, what if we didn't have to stop? And so I started kind of feeding in some breadcrumbs in that issue, thinking I knew kind of who the next big villain could be, a villain called Tempest the Time Master. And so that was that became kind of like a fun thing where Dynamite first told me for volume 2, it wasn't originally a full volume. At first, my editor, Joe Rybant, was just like, what if we added 5 more issues to what we've currently got? And I was like, well, look, Joe, I'm a professional, of course, but 5 is tight for a runway because we spent 11 issues building to the Council of Doom. And that's why it felt so satisfying. So if you want to do something that kind of feels like that, I can do 5 with Tempest the Time Master. But I said, if you could give me, I think I had said 8. I said, I can feed in a really cool subplot about the twins and their meeting their grandfather, Dr. Henry Contra, who gets transformed into the antimatter man. It's sort of like the Harvey Dent of the Space Ghost universe. And so I kind of wrote up a pitch with both. Joe said, "Okay, we'll do 8." And then I think by the time I finished issue 2. I had said, well, if I had 10, I could get Tarko the Terrible in there, and I could get, or no, I think yeah, no, I said if I get 2 more, I could do the Space Sharks and the Crystalline Empire. And they're like, yeah, sure, that sounds fun. So like they added 2 more, and then by issue 1, by the time I finished that, it was Comic-Con, and I was like, listen, Joe, if I could get 2 more. I was like the mouse asking for a cookie. I was like, if you can give me 2 more, I can do Space Vampires and I can do Sorceress. And Joe's like, yeah, sure, go on. So we're already at like 10 at this point, or 12. And then as I'm about to start writing issue 12, Joe Joe comes to me and he goes, listen, first volume was 13 issues. We can't end this on 12 issues now. Now we have to do a 13th. And a couple things had happened. One was we had started talking about doing Space Ghost events, and Dynamite had really wanted, and maybe someday it'll happen. They were like, "Do you have any ideas to put together Captain Planet and Space Ghost?" And I was like, "That's a lot of moving parts. I still haven't really figured out an answer to that." But I was like, who I'd really like to do is another team that you guys have the license to. And also, I was just like, at the same time, I was like, Joe, I'm about to start my finale for this year. What am I gonna do? So I went in my office, I pulled my hair for a little while, I screamed into a pillow, and then I realized, no, wait, God love him, Joe Rybant, my editor. He's doing me a favor. He's giving me more runway, and you never say no to more runway. And so I realized, oh, I can have our big kind of blockbuster ending for Tempest the Time Master in issue 12 of Space Ghost. And that's extra sized. It's a 28-page story. It was because it was originally our big finale. I'm now able to take that emotional fallout from all of that. And rather than kind of shortchange it into something quick, I can really kind of draw that out over the sort of final storyline. And so Space Ghost Annual is kind of a bookend to the first issue of Volume 2, which started with a conversation. That was structured about Jan and Jace having a conversation when they've met their grandfather for the first time. And they're explaining basically why does the universe need a space ghost? And more importantly, why is the man behind the mask so important to them? All while trying to maintain their own secret identities. And then we saw Space Ghost kind of having a solo adventure against the Toy Maker, who is Tempest the Time Master's lieutenant, and kind of in his feelings a little bit about he might not have these kids anymore and what might happen. This annual is kind of our response to that issue, in that the heart of our series has been about Space Ghost walking that line between being a superhero and being this kind of surrogate father figure, to Jan and Jace. He's walked the line pretty well, but beating Tempest came with a cost. And It's really kind of thrown that balance all out of whack. And now Space Ghost is kind of having his long dark night of the soul about whether or not he can possibly continue. So he's got a conversation with a really interesting counterpart in this issue. And meanwhile, we're going to be intercutting it with an adventure that he has with the twins, where they're up against a thief whose name is Magnus, and he's kind of like the Doctor Octopus, or maybe even the Stilt Man of the Space Coast universe. He's got this armored suit that lets his arms and legs kind of telescope out. He's got like different types of weaponry that attaches to it, and his partner, who's this mysterious reality warping being known only as the alien. And Magnus and the alien have stolen some technology that's particularly volatile. And so Space Ghost and the twins have to basically stop him and retrieve this thing before it blows up half the city. And Magnus and the alien, they have a secret to them. Space Ghost does not quite know the whole of this heist. And when he kind of figures out what their deal is, it's going to kind of hit him where he lives, and it's going to sort of push him to this crisis of faith that he's having. So yeah, it really is kind of the story of just, how does Space Ghost see himself, and does, has when it was just by himself, his mission didn't have a cost. Now he's got other people to think about. Is it fair for him to try to do both? And what do the kids think about all this? But the thing, I've talked all about the emotion and the character work, and Magnus, this fun character. But the annual also does something extremely important in terms of our run on Space Ghost, which is it's going to tee up our big Space Ghost event kicking off in September, which is we are bringing in Alex Toth's other iconic sci-fi adventurers, the Herculoids, into the fold. We're sort of building up Space Ghost universe in a much bigger way that is going to lead us to Space Ghost Volume 3. But Space Ghost, we've got our 5-issue event kicking off in September 1st, Space Ghost and the Herculoids. And it's fun, I mean, Space Ghost as a book, I love doing all the different genre twists and kind of injecting all sorts of pop culture DNA into it. But I also love kind of doing some of just like the fun tropes of superheroism. And I have yet to do sort of that superhero team up. And so the idea of sort of like, oh, like, what happens when this found family that we sort of built this story, all of our themes around that. What happens when this found family meets a totally different family from the other side of the cosmic tracks? A family that is powerful and strange and does things very, very differently, but they got the muscle to back it up. And so it's kind of, there's a little Batman, Superman in there, but it's fun to see Space Ghost have to, deal with a space barbarian by the name of Xandor. His fearsome wife, Tara, their acrobatic son, Dorno, and the 5 interstellar kaiju that make up the Herculoids. That's the Herculoids in a nutshell. And they're so fun to get to write. I am sort of getting to stretch some muscles that I haven't since Savage Avengers when I wrote Conan the Barbarian. There's definitely some shared DNA between him and Xandor. But like Space Ghost, I watched all the episodes of Herculoids to sort of kind of figure out how they make sense, and are there any episodes and landmarks that I can draw from to build up a sort of backstory for these characters. Tom Znignowski did an amazing run on Herculoids 10 issues that came out that wrapped up last year. And so I wanted to take kind of what he did and then sort of scaffold around that. We've built up a full backstory for the Herculoids, same as we did for Space Ghost. And you'll see that in Space Ghost Herculoids #1. You'll see Xandor's early days as a gladiator of Kyanite, where he was forced to fight and compete in Emperor Neron's arena beside Tundro as his loyal battle beast. You'll see their first meeting with Gloop, who was the Emperor's sort of enslaved protoplasm. You'll see them getting rescued from the arena for the first time by Tara, who was raised by the adopted daughter of the village elder Corsac. And basically she's the mayor's daughter, who's also a revolutionary who thinks Amzad is a free world and it should be free for everyone. And that's really, I think, the heart of Space Ghost versus the Herculoids is Space Ghost is about defending the defenseless. And the Herculoids do that too, but they are about fighting for freedom against enslavement, against exploitation. And that's really Xandor's sort of character arc, is that he met this woman who gave him a second chance at life, who taught him that the world of Amzad, there's more to it than just blood and death. It's a world that's as beautiful as it is strange and deadly, and it's given him new purpose. And when they had their son Dorno, that sort of, it was a second chance. All the pain of Xandor's past is long behind him, or so we think. Without spoiling too much, when Space Ghost and Xandor meet for the first time, something has happened that has made Xandor backslide badly. And so that kind of that's a lot of the fun dramatic friction between those two characters. It's that anybody who's been reading our run on Space Ghost knows that he's my grouchy boy. He's oops all fists. He Space Ghost, I think, does take a little perverse sense of pride. Often the toughest, scariest guy in any room. Xandor's not from around here, and he's not buying what this clown in a mask is selling. And so, and he's a barbarian who not only, learned the art of war in Emperor Neron's arena, but the Herculoids' unique physiology, both the barbarians and their beasts, they've spent their entire lives metabolizing a rare element found only in Amzot's ecosystem called quasarite. And that's our nod to the original cartoon. One of the weapons of the Herculoids was they had what they called energy rocks, and they put them in slingshots and they would explode. But there were also a few episodes, one called the Purple Menace that really stood out, that they could also affect and mutate the local ecosystem. It's almost like reverse kryptonite. That it can, this quasarite can not only power weapons and starships and bombs, but it can also, if you're exposed to it long term, or if you ingest it briefly, it can cause increased strength and durability and speed and aggression. And that's sort of what kind of brings these teams together, is an element like quasarite was never going to stay hidden forever. And when somebody finds it, it's gonna draw out the Herculoids from Amzot in a way we haven't seen before. And that really kind of leads to that kind of core dichotomy between Space Ghost and the Herculoids to me, is that Space Ghost, he operates outside the law, of course, but as a vigilante, but he does defend, the planets of the Galactic Federation. He is ultimately a defender of the status quo. The Herculoids, their whole existence is outside of that status quo. The status quo has done nothing but try to harm them. They are firmly anti-establishment. And so it's kind of fun, like sort of seeing like this essentially law-abiding vigilante versus like kind of an eco-terrorist. Like seeing, but like well-intentioned, and like, his point has been made. Where's the common ground? And the common ground is that they are both fathers who love their children, who will do anything to keep them safe. And so, yeah, it's like a good superhero team up. There's going to be some friction before they put their differences aside. This is the biggest story that Jonathan and I have told in this series to date. It's our first experiment with long form storytelling. The Herculoids are a big cast. We're essentially doubling our cast, if not tripling them. So this is a 5-part event, 5-part storyline. I know we're rolling the dice. We are deviating from our done in one and done in two formula, but I wanted to make sure. We've spent 2 years establishing Space Ghost. We've got to go a little faster with the Herculoids, and so I wanted to make sure their first adventure was our biggest one yet, to show these characters can go toe to toe with the heroes you've grown to know and love. And yeah, that'll lead us to year 3, where you will see Space Ghost. His universe will continue to explore. You will see some other fun team ups that I can't quite share just yet. But that my goal is to sort of make this his Brave and the Bold era. So lots of fun stuff coming. We're still kind of firming up exactly what that final runway is going to look like. I believe that that Jonathan and I are committed to at least 44 issues on this book, but my goal is to try to see if we can get us to 50. So write your congressman, write Dynamite, tell him you want us on for 50. I would love to do it. The stories are there, the villains are there. I love Space Ghost. The potential has been untapped for so long, and I feel so lucky to be able to be one of the creators that gets to do that.
one of the characters that I've found most fascinating in your run is your
Yeah.
take on Space Spectre.
Yeah.
Because that was a character that I wasn't familiar with, because he's from the later Space
He's from the
Ghost
yeah, he's
stuff.
from the Space Stars, the 80s revival.
Right, which was not something I'd seen, but the his I looked him up because I was like, oh, that's but the stuff you did with him. I mean, and you granted added all sorts of flavor to a lot of these characters that were just sort of like
Yeah.
villains. But the stuff with him being, it's an old comic, I can say,
Yeah,
him
yeah,
being Jan from the or Jace from the future.
yeah.
That's all you, right?
That's all me. And that was actually a change we made at the 11th hour. Early as I was starting to write that issue. Because in my original outline, it was just Space Ghost in the future. It was sort of what if Batman had to fight Dark Knight Returns Batman, you know? And as I sat down to start writing it, I was just like, I don't know, that doesn't like is that the most dramatic like way to hit it? And I remember asking a few buddies of mine sort of what they thought and I said, well, the other alternative is I could make a Jace. And then it's like as I said it, just the words kind of like hung in the air. And my friends were like, yeah, do that. That's way better. And so yeah, because I wanted to make that reveal when he pulled his mask off. I was just like that adds a little something. If you're like, oh, they're like he pulled off the mask, like, and we don't see it, like, what is that? Now, to that it gets people a little more interested. And yeah, it wound up kind of paying off as I was thinking about sort of this Tempest three-parter well over a year ago. Even when I was sort of figuring out the end of the first volume, I was like, okay, if we have Tempest the Time Master, time travel was a core trope in that was used in a lot of episodes of Space Ghost. So I wanted to do something in that vein, and separating Space Ghost and the twins made a lot of sense to me, especially when you see how we bring them all back together in issue 12 that's coming out next week. Or I guess by the time this comes out, it may already be out. But yeah, like I having Space Spectre there as sort of a surrogate Space Ghost, and sort of, oh, Jace, who's like he's the comic relief, he's my favorite character, being like, oh, something broke that man, like now he's dark broody Jace, he's sort of the Red Hood of the Space Ghost universe. So he's very fun. There's one other story that maybe I could tell with him down the line. I don't know. I feel like there's something I would love to see a story in Space Spectre's future. Especially since we have the Herculoids in the mix now. I would love to see a team up with him and King Dorno. As sort of like the broody, like Aquaman of Amzot. I don't know. I don't know if we can fit it in. I mean, it's tricky when you're trying to do these stories because you never want to like deliver something that doesn't have the title character in it. So I don't know if I could ever make it work, but I love Space Spectre. He's super fun. He's got a really cool. He does some really cool stuff in issue 12 that you'll see soon. We did not reintroduce him lightly. We wanted to make sure that if he came back, he did something big. And so you're gonna see exactly what that is in issue 12.
You mentioned altogether between the 2 years of Space Ghost,
Yeah.
this Herculoids event, year three. You've got it's just in general, it's heartening to see a creator get that kind of like run length in this
Yeah.
day and age. Even a more like episodic IP like Space Ghost or
Sure.
Skybound's Hasbro books or Something is Killing the Children, Exquisite Corpses, that Texas Blood, which is coming back. I'm feeling like the runway for books, at least in the non-big two spaces, is starting to extend again. Like,
Yeah.
there's less of this reliance on like mini series and like hasty reboots and stuff. Are you kind of feeling that or?
Well, I would like for that to be the case, and I I don't think it's quite as guaranteed yet as I would like for it to be. But I do think we are seeing some encouraging signs that we are seeing runs that are extending, runs that are going the distance. Because you're right, like doing the reboots and even renumbering Space Ghost. I mean, that was something that we went back and forth at Dynamite many times, and the decision was made and reversed at least three times. I like up until right before they announced that it was a new number one, I genuinely thought it was going to be issue 13. And I think it came down to at that point, especially with Dynamite and especially sort of coming off of everything going on with Diamond, and Dynamite was so invested in Diamond. I think that came down to, like, what can we do to sort of prime that book for the most success to keep it viable, financially. And I think the prevailing wisdom was lapsed readers might come back for a new one, and people who missed out the first time, this is a second chance for them to show up. And we've had such a loyal and passionate fan base for volume one. We're trusting them to come back for volume two. But it's still one of those things that that was a double-edged choice. Like, it's still not a choice that I don't think there was any choice that any of us would have been super happy with, knowing that it was sort of a brand new story for a brand new year. But yeah, I do think that, like, mini series, I was just thinking about this yesterday. It's tough, like, it's one thing if it's a creator-owned thing where, like, people I think are expecting a beginning, middle, and end. But yeah, especially for something licensed, I think we are so used to thinking of comics, of course, in the monthly model. But I do think that something that they shares a little something in common with network television. I used to work in network TV. I worked at CBS, in publicity, before their tumbling descent into fascism. And I It's one of those things that people, the Big Bang Theory. I'm going to put that out there, for example. I'm not going to say that that's like, that's not like David Mamet writing, like I think it's about as lowbrow and unsophisticated as it gets, but it worked. And that's because there were characters that people wanted to check in on week in and week out. And that's this one of the strengths of comics that I think we may have forgotten a little bit. And or maybe have also forgotten the importance of a creator's perspective on it. Is that I do think that there have been times where people say, well, it's Moon Knight. Like, does it matter who's on Moon Knight? Like, as long as we get Moon Knight content out there. And I think people are realizing, like, yeah, of course it matters. You see Jed McKay's amazing run on it. That only works because Jed has been able to stay on the book. It's been his voice and his vision the whole time. But fans want to know they can what to expect. They want to know, not necessarily to anticipate the story, but they want to know, like, okay, this is sort of, the vibe I'm interested in. I want to make sure my title character is actually in the book. Does the thing that the title character is supposed to do is written in a voice that seems recognizable to me? And I just want to know I can count on that, to keep coming back. And they don't want to invest. Now, on the flip side of that, and this is something I guess we're going to find out on Space Ghost, for as long as we're on it, is how long will readers stick around? Because there's always the new thing competing for attention, and there's always, attrition for a million different reasons. I don't know what the sweet spot is. I don't know if it's 2 years. I don't know if it's three. I don't know, like, and it of course depends on how prominent the characters are. Space Ghost does not equal Spider-Man. As much as I would love to claim otherwise. So, yeah, that's that. I love seeing longer runs. I think it gives writers a bit more of a chance to sort of, plan ahead, tell longer stories, and or in the case of Space Ghost, tell a lot of done in one stories, and then you build a lot of investment. So, yeah, I do think miniseries, though. I think the unless it's a creator-owned thing, unless it's like a big swing that is going to be like a finite story, I do think that that's kind of running its course a bit, or maybe, or I should say, it's out of season at this point. Because yeah, people, like, if it's a short-term thing, I think, especially if it's for a character that people really love, they want to know that the publisher's invested in it, that the publisher believes in it. And I think they're, whether or not, I don't think it's intentional, but I think that's the sign that we've been maybe showing people is, oh, we don't believe in this, so we're only going to commit to five. Even if the story is fully complete, it's just sort of like, oh, okay, like, I'd rather do a lot of stories with, you know, Squirrel Girl or whatever, like, rather than just like a one-shot adventure, or a 5-issue arc.
You started nudging Dynamite or thinking about the day years from now where there is a hardcover Space Ghost by David Pepose and Jonathan Lau
That'd be
omnibus.
amazing. I would love it. Write your congressman. I really write your congressman that we need to reprint volume one.
I learned that our congressman is ineffective.
You know, I you're the first one to ever respond that to me. That's so funny. I yeah, I will say like Space Ghost is another one of those things where I felt kind of prescient that I ordered a whole bunch of it since I know that first trade is kind of stuck in the diamond warehouse. So say you want to reprint a volume one, that would really do me a lot of good because I hate just trying to push people to Kindle for the first six issues. But yeah, I would love to see an omnibus of all that. I mean, I was telling Jonathan, like Jonathan's fast. Jonathan's really fast. Jonathan, I think, is working on a second book right now. He's so fast. It's all I can do to sort of stay ahead of him. He's so fast. But I was just like, Jonathan can go the distance, and I know he can. 50 issues with the same creative team, unbroken. I don't think you've seen that since Bendis and Bagley. Even Scott and Greg had fill-ins, and that would kind of blow my damn mind if we were so lucky. But that's why I consider myself so lucky to work with Jonathan Lau, is he's an amazingly creative and fast and consistent guy.
So I want to make sure we get at least one question in about
Yeah.
Speed Racer, and
Yes.
it's going to be an inane one, but I know you've thought about this. Who wins in a fight, Blip or Chim Chim?
Oh, Blip, 100%, 100% Blip. I mean, Blip's got the gadgets, and Blip also has his neural implant, so he's smarter. But also like Chim Chim lives a privileged life. He literally lives with like a teenage live streamer. He's like fed him like a diet of Cheetos. So I don't think I'm not even. I feel like that fight, quote unquote, would just be like Chim Chim like losing his breath, like just like wheezing like after like the first punch. I feel like Blip wouldn't like hurt him. I think he would just kind of like tie him up while pitying him. But yeah, that's a funny question. I do feel like I'm comics leading monkey laureate, having written my Winged Monkeys in the OZ and Space Ghost and Speed Racer. All of my books have monkeys in them. I know Dan Slott's trying to horn into my turf with Superman Unlimited. He's got a Titano story going on, but I have more monkeys than you, Dan. So I'm watching you. But yeah, Speed
That makes
Racer.
you part of a time-honored comics tradition.
That's right. That's right. Like I'm the 500-pound gorilla in the room. But I will say, we've got some fun stuff coming in Speed Racer. Our Demon on Wheels storyline kicks off this month. And that's going to be a fun two-parter. Speed is exposed to an experimental street drug known as V-gas, which drivers have been using as a performance enhancer to increase their fearlessness and aggression. Unfortunately, they've been doing it in a more supervised fashion, unlike Speed, who does not know what hit him. All he knows is that he is fully unleashed on the tracks now. And so we're going to see Speed kind of operating at his full capacity without being shackled by a moral compass. And his supporting cast is going to have to work overtime to see if they can, first off, to figure out what the hell happened, but also can they bring him back from the edge, before he does something irrevocable that he might regret. And so, we're going to see, I'll give you a little spoiler for issue 10 that's up for pre-orders. We're seeing the rematch of Speed Racer versus Racer X. The Vegas has a tie to Racer X's past, for the days that he trained in the jungles of Capetapec. And so Racer X is kind of this character who in issue 9 is kind of in the periphery, but he's the only one that knows what's going on. And so when he finds out that, oh, this thing is already spread, this thing is already kind of hitting my family where they live, he's going to have to kind of like dive in while trying to kind of keep his identity secret. And that'll lead us up to arc 3, which I believe is kicking off later in the fall. We're going to have the Melange, which is a classic Speed Racer villain. And that character is super fun. He's sort of like if Carl Cranham was our evil version of Speed Racer, this is sort of our evil version of Racer X, who's been sort of murdering corrupt Formula X officials. And as we see very early on in that story, Racer X has tried to stop him and gets his ass handed to him for all of his efforts, and unfortunately now all the crimes are pinned on him. So this is going to be a fun sort of a little bit of a detective story for Speed off the tracks, where he's got to figure out what is the melange and figure out how he can clear Racer X's name. It's some of the coolest stuff I've done in the book. The Melange is a very fun character in the way that like Space Spectre kind of took on a life of his own. That's been happening with the Melange, and that'll lead us to our epic sort of three-part storyline that sort of caps off our first year on the book, the Formula X Championships, and when Dante Furno, the head of the car acrobatic team, suits up once again as the fearsome Captain Terror. So lots of fun stuff coming for Speed and Company. It's been rocky in a race car, and now we're sort of building up to that big finale.
So as we wrap up,
Yeah.
what's a book by another creator that you're digging right now?
Man, okay, there are a few. I mean, I will say, like, I feel like all the stuff that like Dennis Camp is doing, I really admire that. I always say he's taking a swing at it, and that's sort of my favorite kinds of books. I'm looking at Comic Book Roundup right now to just see what I'm looking at. I know Zach Kaplan has a new book out. Only the Savage Are Left. I read the first issue. I thought it was excellent. Kind of an interesting twist on the zombie genre, but also it sort of really leans into kind of the ethical concerns of it. I think if I have to say one comic out there, I think that's the best superhero comic on the market. I know it's a cliche, but it's absolute Wonder Woman by a landslide. The stuff that Kelly and Hayden are doing put the rest of us to shame. They're doing fantastic work. But I also really like, it's a little bit more of a dark horse. Deathstroke by Tony Fleece and Carmine Monaco. I totally butchered his name. And Ivan Placencia on colors. That's the best looking book in the whole business, and for my money. And I really loved what Absolute Green Arrow, Pornsak just showed, is a really nice guy who actually was the first person to greet me on my very first day as a DC intern. So I'll always remember him for that. Nice guy. And Raphael Albuquerque. I love the way that they inject the horror and the crime into that first issue. I got to bug him to see if he'll share the second issue with me or not. So those are some really fun books, just kind of off the top of my head that are coming out right now.
We've tackled a lot in the last bit of time here. Is there anything else that you need to get a plug in for, whether it's other
No,
work,
I mean,
signings, conventions, anything like that?
no, I'm not doing any signings or things coming up unless we do have a store signing anywhere in the continental U.S. as sort of our ultimate tier for the OZ. I Want More Comics was the lucky store for our last campaign in Denver. So if you're willing to support us to that level, I will come in. We'll do an OZ launch party. But beyond that, just making sure Space Ghost is added to your pull list, both the Space Ghost annual in July and then Space Ghost and Herculoids starting in September. Speed Racer, make sure that's added to your pull list. But ultimately, the OZ, it's my baby. You really want to see that thing fund. Depending on when this goes live, the earlier you back it, the better. The first 2 days are always the most important. If this isn't within 2 days of the campaign, ignore me. But we do have early bird rewards for the first 48 hours, discounts. But that helps just bump us up in Kickstarter's algorithm. It's a huge help. This book is near and dear to me. It's been a long time coming, but it's because we've been working nonstop at it. So, I hope you join us as a Yellow Brick Road warrior.
Final question as we release you back into the world. Where do people need to go to follow the OZ and also keep up with everything else that you got going on?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at PeposeD. You can also follow the OZ. You can go to tinyurl.com/the OZ comic, and you'll be able to go on our page and pledge to your heart's content.
Right on, David. Every year, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can find the Comics XF interview podcast at Comics XF, along with our sister podcasts, Battle of the Atom and Bat Chat with Matt and Will. You can listen to the Comics XF interview podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Audible, and at comicsxf.com, where new episodes move Tuesday mornings. You can support Comics XF at patreon.com/comicsxf, where a $1 donation gets you a shout out at the end of every episode of the Comics XF interview podcast. A $2 donation gets you early access to this podcast and a shout out at the end of every episode. A $3 donation get you access to our monthly bonus podcast, Our Son Pete, a deep dive into the comic appearances of British mutant super spy Pete Wisdom. A $5 donation gets you access to Our Son Pete and a Pete Wisdom Hawklaw sticker designed by Kevin Newburn, or an update to the Xavier Files Mutant Master Rankings at Comics XF. A $25 donation lets you request a primer, one of our custom reading guides for a series, character, or creator, and a $50 donation lets you advertise on the show. You can also go to patreon.com/comicsxf to order copies of the Comics XF zine, featuring some of the best articles from the history of the site. Digital copies are $10, physical copies are $15, and supplies are limited. Big thanks to our patrons: Kaylee Post, Nathan Elwood, Mark Danielson, Silas X, Jack Adams, Sean Shambly, Matt
McThorny,
Buddy Nooning, Jake Murray, Zach Quaintance, Joel Elod, Lisa Slack, Will Redman, Tobias Carroll, Liz Large, Asimov Fangirl, Carla Pacheco, and Shelf Dust. You're all special, and we love you. You can follow Comics XF on Blue Sky, X, Threads, Facebook, and Instagram at Comics XF. Me at Daniel P. Grote on Blue Sky, and Matt Lazowitz at MattLaz1013 on Blue Sky. And until next week, remember, Batman co-creator Bob Kane's gravestone says the following: God bestowed a dream upon Bob Kane. Blessed with divine inspiration and rich imagination, Bob created a legacy known as Batman. Introduced in a May 1939 comic book, Batman grew from a tiny acorn into an American icon. A hand of God creation, Batman and his world personified the eternal struggle of good versus evil, with God's laws prevailing in the end. Bob Kane, Bruce Wayne, Batman. They are one and the same. Bob infused his dual identity character with his own attributes: goodness, kindness, compassion, sensitivity, generosity, intelligence, integrity, courage, purity of spirit, a love for all mankind. Batman is known as the Dark Knight, but through his deeds he walks in the light of a higher power, as did his creator, Bob Kane, beloved husband, father, grandfather, in loving memory. With Bill Finger.